Hey guys, welcome. This is going to be module 2, but I just wanted to do a little recap today, um, sort of outline where we've been and where we're going. As you can see, I got my Giants garb on today. Unfortunately, the team decided not to win today, 20-15. So we can always hope for next week. That's why we have 16 weeks of the season. So anyhow, we'll hopefully next week they'll do something for me. Anyhow, I just want to do a quick recap on Module 1 and sort of let you know where we're going here this coming week in Module 2. So in Module 1, we learned about the federal courts. In our discussion board assignments, you debated whether federal judges should continue to be appointed or elected. And as part of your post, you had to support your position by referencing the qualifications and duties of federal judges. I thought you guys did a great job on this week's discussion board, a lot of robust discussion. We had arguments on both sides for judges being elected and judges being appointed. So there really is no wrong answer to this question, but it really makes you think about federal judges and some of the decisions that they have to make and whether or not those decisions are better served by being appointed or being elected. Okay. As you learn, the formal qualifications for federal judges is very minimal. Some of you discussed this in your post. And there's a reason for the minimal formal qualifications for federal judges. And I think we have to look at it from a historical perspective. When our founding fathers adopted the Constitution, the legal profession wasn't as robust as it is now. There were very few practicing attorneys and even fewer law schools. So that's the reason why the qualifications seemed rather minimal, especially in today's world. In reality, though, judges appointed to the bench often have years of experience in the legal profession, and as some of you pointed out, many federal judges have gone to Ivy League law schools. So over the years, Congress has elected to use the informal requirements as a means to evaluate a potential jurist's qualifications before they sit on the bench. So I'm glad a lot of you brought that up because I think it's important to just understand that and get a sense for historically why that was done. In your short paper this week, you learned about the structure of the federal court system. And really our federal courts have 3 tiers. We have U.S. district courts, which are the trial courts of the federal court system. We have the United States Circuit Courts of Appeals, which are the intermediate appellate courts. And of course, we have the U.S. Supreme Court. The key roles for both the Supreme Court and the Circuit Court of Appeals is an error corrector. Through their evaluation of the appeal, they determine whether or not judges made the right decision or the legal question is resolved either in favor of the court below or not. Either way, it serves as a level of oversight that these courts have. Obviously, the district courts, the circuit courts rather, have oversight on the courts within their district, and the Supreme Court obviously has oversight of all the courts throughout the federal system as well as state courts where applicable. So I think it's important that you carefully look at and evaluate the roles of each, especially the appellate courts and the U.S. Supreme Court. When you look at the cases, for example, that the Circuit Courts of Appeals hear and versus those that get the U.S. Supreme Court, the Circuit Court of Appeals really has no option. They have to hear every appeal. And those are run the gamut from a frivolous lawsuit, which an inmate, for example, who's complaining about prison food files a claim in district court for violation of the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. Maybe his appeal gets denied, and they file appeal, or he files appeal to the circuit courts, because a lot of times inmates can do their own work and file their own cases and their own appeals. Some of it is just for lack of a better word, nonsense in terms of some of the appeals that people try to file in from district court to circuit courts. But nonetheless, circuit courts have to hear it. But they also get tasked with hearing some very serious cases that raise serious constitutional questions, whether it be about abortion or segregation or discrimination or things like that, right? Whereas, as we learned, the Supreme Court, they're very selective on the cases they hear. They're going to hear cases that have raise a significant constitutional question or something that really needs to be clarified regarding federal law. So pay attention when the Supreme Court makes a significant ruling, and you get a sense for the type of cases that they hear, and maybe you get an insight as to why they hear them. But anyhow, pay attention to the roles of those two, especially as we get working on our final project where you sort of have to repeat and revisit this exact same paper. All right. And our textbook has a lot of good examples of the type of cases that these courts hear. Both of these courts, too, by the way, are involved in policymaking because many cases never make it past a district court. So their decision is, in fact, a law within that circuit. And some of those are rather significant, and the Supreme Court lets those stand. So just get an understanding of the importance of those roles that these two courts have within the federal judicial system. I really appreciate everyone's great work this week in getting your initial post in by Thursday. It really helps your classmates because it gives them an opportunity to evaluate your post and then respond to them after they read and evaluate and get a sense for your thread. All right, so I think that really serves a great purpose. So continue to do that, and I appreciate it. This week in Module 2, we're going to explore state courts, a little bit different than federal courts, and most of us have more familiarity with state courts than federal courts because most of us probably have been in state courts for one reason or another, where it may be a speeding ticket or maybe a small claims action or something to that effect. So most of us are somewhat more familiar with with local courts and state courts than federal courts. In our discussion board assignment this week, you're going to research the judicial system of your home state and answer a series of questions about state judges and state court structure. Read those carefully and make sure that when you complete your discussion board, you address each of the specific prompts associated with this week's assignment. In your Module 2 short paper this week, you're going to evaluate the job qualifications and description of state and federal judges. Please make sure you review my short video lecture this week, and I also provided you a handout. And in my handout, I highlight the typical duties of a federal judge and some of the skills that are necessary, because in any job description, you're looking at maybe the potential skills and duties. So if you look at a job for a police officer, it'll highlight the typical duties. If you're looking at the job of probation officer, it'll highlight also maybe the typical skills involved. So maybe you have to have the ability to read and write English, or you have to have the ability to, maybe you have to have a knowledge of some type of computer program or something like that. But duties and skills are an important part of any job description. So that's why I posted that on there for you this week. So please take a look at that. It's in a PDF file. You can print it up and use it as you see fit for this week's short paper. Don't forget, our short papers require at least 3 sources, and then you have to reference those sources using APA format. If you're not familiar with that, I'll be posting something later this week on the Writing Center here at the Southern New Hampshire, as well as I like to call it a little cheat sheet for APA format. So again, take a look at that if you think you need it, but just remember, look through the assignment guidelines and make sure that you include all the stuff that's required for these assignments as you begin working on them. All right. Again, I appreciate everyone's hard work this week. We're off to a great start, and your efforts have not gone unnoticed. Okay. Anyhow, for those of you who are football fans, I hope your teams did well this week. If not, there's always next week. All right. I'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.